Dr. Pachauri, thank you for meeting NATO Review. First of all, congratulations on winning the Nobel Peace Prize.
Thank you.
Could you tell me what that means for you personally and in terms of the message it sends out?
Well, to me personally, of course, it's a source of pride. One feels very good, but of course, the award is meant for the entire IPCC community and the governments who take decisions for the IPCC. So it's a unique sense of pleasure that you see such a large-scale effort being recognized. I think it also sends out a very important message that climate change has very important relationships with various elements of peace, and that we need to start focusing on this issue. I think the nexus between what climate change can do in terms of impacts and peace and stability and security across the globe is something that needs to be highlighted now on the basis of the message that you get from this award.
Do you think that the possible effects of future climate change, such as the increased competition for resources, land and even water, means that the definition of security needs to be redefined?
I think so, because security is not sending in troops to some place or the other. I think firstly we have to be intellectually much more rigorous in understanding the drivers of security or the threats to security, and that certainly is an ongoing effort that has to be mounted on a large scale. Secondly, I think we also need to understand that when you're talking about climate change, there's a whole range of other development issues that need to be kept in mind. There's the issue of equity. Therefore, there is a certain ethical dimension in this whole thing. The whole issue of consumption of depleting natural resources. We're certainly going to find much more intense competition for remaining resources, such as hydrocarbons, for instance. The fact that Russia planted a flag under the North Pole is only symbolic of this enormous competition to get there first. And that certainly could be a threat to security in some form or the other. And this, in a way, will also distort politics across the globe. You'll find that those agents and those organizations that are able to help countries and societies in providing access to resources will be favored, will be supportive, even if they're repressive regimes, even if they violate the very basic principles on which democracy and all the freedoms that we value are based on. So, I think there's a new set of issues that need to be carefully highlighted and understood if we are talking about security.
How likely do you think it is that the effects of climate change could lead to a major armed conflict?
Yes, I think one reason for such conflict could be competition for scarce resources. Water is certainly one of them. It could be hydrocarbon resources. There could be problems of, let's say, decline in agricultural yields, which leads to deprivation in terms of nutrition and food, and a whole range of catastrophes and natural disasters which would get exacerbated with the impacts of climate change. Now, essentially, all of this means that there is the danger of larger and larger numbers of people moving from wherever they are settled to other areas. And when you start seeing this kind of a trend, then clearly you have the inbuilt elements of conflict. And I would imagine this is likely to grow to a large extent. For instance, in the IPCC synthesis report, we've estimated that by 2020, in Africa alone, there would be something like 75 to 250 million people who would be suffering from growing water scarcity. And therefore, what are they going to do? They're going to move around. There will be conflict even among communities for limited water resources. And this can multiply on a large scale in several parts of the world.
In the aftermath of several environmental disasters, such as the Pakistani earthquake, Hurricane Katrina, NATO has already played a humanitarian and assistance role. Do you believe that this role will be demanded increasingly as this type of event grows?
Yes, I should think so, and I imagine NATO, in its own interests and in keeping with its overall objectives, should start anticipating some of these events and some of these possibilities, which means that it would have to carry out much deeper research, much greater intellectual introspection of how things are shaping up in different parts of the world. NATO, after all, came into existence when the Cold War was on, and that rationale is gone now. And I think, given the fact that it is an organization which has enormous strengths, has the inputs of a large number of extremely important countries, I think it has to redefine its role. And I would imagine that it should be driven by a much greater study of what is likely to happen in the future than to be caught unawares. And if that's the case, NATO certainly can play an extremely important role in preventing or managing some of these threats and problems.
And in terms of prevention, what would you recommend?
Well, it seems to me, and I've been feeling this for a while, that an organization like NATO needs to work much more closely with civil society, with organizations that have their ear on the ground, that have some support at the grassroots level. And this would not only help NATO to get feedback on what's happening over there, but also in the event of possible crisis or conflict, mobilize some of these organizations as allies. So I think it has to reach out. It has to get out of the military operation type of mode. I think there's much more to prevention of these conflicts than just moving in there when the conflict has actually occurred.
Working on environmental challenges will require an increasing degree of trust and/or cooperation. Where do you see the role of major international organizations such as the UN and NATO in building this trust and cooperation?
I really think they'll become increasingly important, simply because these are issues that a country or a group of countries are not going to be able to solve. You really need a totally different global compact. You need global initiatives that are able to define these problems and are able to find multilateral solutions for them. So I would say an organization like the UN probably needs to redefine its role and perhaps even restructure its organization. The new Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, I must say, has picked up climate change as perhaps the most important part of his agenda. And I'm very, very grateful that he has taken up this position. And I admire the man for having the perception and the sense of understanding that this really could be the defining problem of the 21st century.
Do you think that terrorist activity will adapt to environmentally related causes, such as attacking energy plants or desalination plants?
Undoubtedly, let's accept the fact that these terrorists are getting a large amount of money from various sources. They get a lot of support, and therefore their methods are also getting technologically more sophisticated. And they would look for some of these measures by which they can create incidents and reactions that would give them headlines, that would give them some power over the course of events. So they would certainly start moving in areas like, say, poisoning the water supply, blowing up pipelines, acting as pirates in several parts of the world, and disrupting the supply of oil and other resources. So I think these are issues that we need to anticipate, which raises another important fact, that I think organizations like NATO need much greater coordination with the intelligence agencies. And perhaps not only relying on the conventional intelligence agencies, but maybe developing some new linkages in areas that they expect are going to become hotspots. That's going to help enormously.
Dr. Pachauri, thank you very much.
Thank you.